In this video, we're going to be talking about the different hardwares that go into cabinets. So there's quite a few different hardwares that we're going to be talking about. We'll just break it down piece by piece and kind of give an explanation of what these different hardwares do, what some of the functions are that they have. And we'll start by going to the material log base in Airtable. And we haven't looked at this yet. We did talk about how, well, we did look at the Airtable base for materials, but we didn't look at this one specific job. So every single job number is in this base. But there is one special job. It's called 1234. It's the very, well, close to the top of your list of projects on this material log. If you open that up, that houses all of the standard hardware that Onsite uses, from all of our cabinets to our panels to our furniture, pretty much everything that we build. These are the standard hardwares, meaning that we do use these a lot. There's going to be times there's going to be hardwares that are not considered standard and they won't be on this list, but the ones that are standard will be here. So talking about cabinets. Cabinets, we'll start with the hinges that you're going to see on cabinets. And when you look at a cabinet, there's going to be three different types of hinges that you're going to see pretty regularly. There is, looking at it here, we have what is called a self-close hinge. We have a soft close hinge. And we also have what's called a free swing hinge. These three types of hinges are pretty common. The most common one that you're going to see is self-close. Self-close is our standard unless an architect asks us to provide a different type of hinge. I do have, might be kind of hard to see on my little camera up there, but I did snag a couple of hinges from our shop so you can kind of see what those look like in real life. If you're in Loves Park, there is a very nice cabinet mock-up that sits up by the engineers. It's a black melamine cabinet that spins and it has a bunch of different cabinet hardwares inside of it. Also has labels that explain what those hardwares are. So this here is a soft close hinge, and it's going to be hard for me to open this, but that's the hinge open. All right, this tab, this gray plastic piece here, is the part that makes it soft close. So as your cabinet door would be attached to this here, your cabinet door closes. As soon as it gets to a certain point, it's hard to see, but it's starting to close on its own, and it closes the door softly for you. This part that's facing me here, this part is going to be on the inside of the cabinet. So kind of like what you're seeing in this view here, that is this portion of the hinge there. And the part that we looked at earlier, the part that my fingers are on here, is the part that's attaching to the door. So again, this is soft close. However, there are other types of hinges too. There's, like we said, self-close and free swing. The hinge that I'm trying to open at my desk and struggling to is a self-close. This one is going to snap shut, and it does not have a nice smooth transition to being closed. It just pulls the door shut. Now, it also pulls it shut pretty hard because I don't have a door attached to it. So there's really not much weighing it down. If I actually had a door attached to this, it wouldn't slam shut quite that hard. But those are two hinges that I have here. And then the other hinge that we're going to talk about is what's called free swing. So free swing hinges are only used in certain cases. So really what you need to remember is when you're using a free swing hinge, what that gets used for is a cabinet that also uses a magnetic touch latch. So a magnetic touch latch is just a magnetic barrel. Let me pull one up on the internet here. It's a magnetic barrel that will push open as it's kind of like a switch. You push the door in and it pops it out. So we cannot use a self-close or a soft close hinge on these types of magnetic touch latched style doors because the hinge has too much tension on it to be able to allow that magnetic hardware to push that door open. So when you're using a magnetic touch latch, which will not happen that often, but when you do have to use one, it is important to note that you're also going to need a free swing door hinge as well. All right, let's go back to our drawing here. Okay, so much like hinges, when you're dealing with a cabinet with slides, let me see if I have one here. Okay, so this cabinet does use slides. You can kind of see them here in this little axonometric view. We've got a slide here, a slide here. I also have one here at my desk, which I have to return to the shop once I'm done with it. This is what it looks like. This is a 14-inch slide. These slides come in increments of 2 inches. So as you're drawing them, you want to make sure that you do not draw them at like 15 inches or 17 inches or anything like that, because you can only buy them in increments of 2. So when you go to draw them, the cabinet blocks also have limits on them that kind of cover your bases, so you don't have to worry about that. But um, yeah, it's important to note that these are only available in increments of 2. So as you're drawing them, please make sure that everything is an even number with a hint or with a slide. Okay, so that is a cabinet slide there. Those also come in several different variations. The most notable ones that you're going to see are mostly going to be self-close and soft close. So just like our cabinet hinges, these slides also come in self-close and soft close. And again, just like the hinges, self-close is our preferred standard if we can get away with it. If the architect is wanting to use soft close, that's fine. It just costs a little bit more to buy those types of slides and hinges. So we try not to use them unless they're asking us to, and they've paid for that. So that's sort of the reason why we use self-close more than soft. There are also going to be things that are called undermount slides, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, later. Those usually will get mounted to the underside of a drawer, and they're usually used for when you have a printer pull-out drawer. So if you have a desk and there's a printer on top of a drawer, that drawer can slide out and you won't see the slides on the side of the drawer. They're going to be hidden underneath of that drawer. So those are undermount slides. Those are also in our standard hardware list and actually don't get used very often, but they are there. Let's see. See if there's any other hinges or slides we need to look at. Technically, this is a hinge. I'm going to show you one real quick. Just had a drawing I did recently that had a vanity. When we get into actually drawing vanities, we'll talk more about these too, but this is a special type of hinge. This is the Aventos HK hinge. It has 2 hardware numbers to it, hardware 9 and hardware 10. Anytime that you're drawing a vanity, you're going to be using that hardware for that vanity. And what that does is, I'll pull it up on YouTube or their website as well, but this is one of those hinges there. Kind of looks like a little submachine gun or something, I'm not really sure, but this is one of those hinges there. And it is spring loaded. So as I'm opening that, you can see that it's starting to open and it kicks out just like that. So your panel, this guy, the front of your cabinet, gets mounted to this part of the hinge. This part of the hinge here will get mounted to the side wall of your vanity cabinet. I'm going to struggle to close this thing now. Anyways, so that is the Aventos HK hinge there. Okay, that is, again, a special type of hinge that is used mostly only on vanities, but it is a pretty decent hinge for that. Let's see, Aventos HK. Pull that up so you can see it on their website. Hopefully they got it here. All right, so there it is in action there. So you can kind of see what they use it for. Typically what it gets used for is an upper cabinet. Like this is what it's actually designed for, is for an upper cabinet to have the door to be able to swing upward towards the ceiling. We just use it for our vanities because it's a effective way of actually using that to make the door openable but not removable, so that way a plumber can go in there, do their work, and close it back up when they're done, and you'll never notice that it's even accessible or movable. There's a video of it in action there too. It's a different style of the hinge, but it's the same concept though. So yeah, that's what they look like. So that's the Aventos HK, which is another type of hinge used only on vanities mostly. Let's move on to the cabinet poles. So when you're drawing a cabinet, we go back to the cabinet sketch that we have over here. This cabinet does not show any poles on it, and that's okay. I just want to show you what poles are and kind of like what the different styles are and what they're named. So you have, most commonly you're going to see these three types of poles. You have what's called a tab pole. A tab pole is very small. It is mounted to the top of your cabinet, like the cabinet door. That's what they are right there. Mounted to the top of the cabinet door, it's got these two screw holes, which will get attached to the back side of that cabinet door. And then this top part will get routed into the top of the door, meaning that it's going to sit, like the top of the pole will be sitting in the same plane or in line with the top of your cabinet door. So this here is a tab pole. Then you have things that are called wire poles. So wire poles are these guys here. They usually kind of have like a little bit of a U shape to them. They get fastened right to the front of the door using these two threaded screw holes right there. That is a wire pole. And then you have things that are called bar poles. So this is a bar pole here, very close to a wire pole, just a little different because it's actually like a bar that sticks off of the front of the cabinet with these two mounts here, like standoff mounts. Attaches the same way as a wire pole, where it's got these threaded inserts that you are able to screw into, and that's what those look like. So that's a bar pole. All right, when you put a pole on a cabinet, let's say I'm going to draw a cabinet with a pole here. So I got a 2-door base cabinet, and that's my pole there. What on-site engineering department does for a standard on this is these cabinet poles will be mounted 2 inches down from the top of the pole to the edge of the door, and it will be mounted 2 inches from the center of the pole to the edge of the door. That is what we use for standard. If an architect specifies they want the pole to be mounted a different way, then that's fine. But just note that if it's not noted on the architectural, we're going to be mounting our poles 2 inches down and 2 inches in from the edge of the door. If you have a cabinet pole that is a drawer, or on a drawer, I should say. So let's look for one of those. If you have a cabinet that has a drawer, like this guy is one big drawer, what we're going to do is we're going to take that pole. Let's just make it a little bigger. Let's say that's your pole there. The standard way of attaching that is we're going to mount this horizontally this time. And we're also going to go 2 inches from the center to the top of that drawer. But it will be in the center line of the door, meaning that if you were to draw this on your print, it would look like this. So there it is, your center line of your drawer, 2 inches down from the top, that's your pull mount there. If you're dealing with tab pulls, it's a little bit different. You don't have to necessarily note the cabinet pull location on the door, because it will be noted that it's going to be at the top corner like this, and the tab pull on the other side will look like that. So tab pulls are going to be mounted just like this. So they're a little bit different. And again, that's these guys. They're a little bit different than wire pulls and bar pulls. They're going to be mounted to the top of the door versus the front of the door. So that's kind of like the gist of what those are going to look like. All right. Same thing though for a pull out. Like we go back to that drawer here. You're going to mount that tab pull right to the top and center of that drawer. So just like that. Okay, so let's move on. We've talked about pulls, we've talked about hinges and slides, undermount slides, the Aventos HK hinge. Let's talk about some other things here. We've got other hardwares that go into cabinets. We have shelf pins. Shelf pins are what makes a shelf adjustable. So you can see these little dots that are here. These are our adjustable shelf pins that we order. Now they're just like a little metal piece that sits inside of that cabinet. This is a different variation than our standard one, but this is a shelf pin. So this mount right here on this side, that goes into the side wall of your cabinet. Let me get a little bit closer. That goes into the side wall of your cabinet where the circles are on the drawing over here. And then this little ledge sticks off of that, and that's what holds your shelf. So you can pop these out, move them up or down to adjust the height of that shelf within that cabinet. That is a shelf pin. So let's go on here. We're going to talk about locks last, I think, but locks are going to be really important too. Not so common, but you will need to know about those to be able to draw them. The last video we did already talk about cabinet cleat. I do have that sort of considered a hardware, although our shop actually produces this, so we don't actually have to buy it. It's just a hardware that we make in our own shop. Then you have things that are called grommets. And I'll pull up what a grommet is here because I don't have one at my desk. So grommets can be a number of things. A lot of times they look like these. These are made for wire management. So you'll see them on desks a lot, or maybe like kitchen cabinets that have appliances underneath or like on the counter that they need wiring to come up to get to. So grommets typically are going to be seen on those types of drawings. They're available in all different sizes, colors, and actually materials too. You can get them in metal as well. But grommets are not limited to just wiring though. There are also things that are called trash grommets too. So if I go to this website, Doug Mockett is a pretty standard industry website that does make these. You make a lot of cabinet pulls and a lot of grommets, so we're going to see a lot of that on drawings going forward. But there are things that are called trash grommets. You've probably seen them before at restaurants or out in public. These usually either come circular or square. Sometimes they have them rectangular as well. But all they are is a metal ring that's made to drop into a hole in the countertop to give you like a nice clean look as you're able to throw your trash into here into a trash can in a cabinet. So that's a trash grommet. So there's wiring grommets and there's trash grommets. So two different types. Let's see. I guess that really just leaves the locks, which I can talk with you about that real quick. So locks, we buy our locks through a company called CompX, C-O-P or C-O-M-P-X, Timberline. If you're in Loves Park, a lot of the engineers up there have these little books. I have one here as well at my desk if anybody needs to use it for anything. This is a ordering catalog, which is a little bit dated, but it does have a lot of good information about these locks, including what finishes they are available in, which we have all this information in the standard hardware list as well. But these are the different finishes you can buy those locks in. And then there are different styles of these locks too, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. So most of the locks that we're going to be dealing with are what are called cam locks. So let me go back to the blocks file here, and I'll kind of pull up some um, lock information for you. Okay, so we'll start with cam locks. They're a little bit easier to understand, and then we'll make our way over to gang locks after that. Okay, so from the front of your cabinet, this is what we're seeing. So we have these here. These are called cam locks. These are the mounting locations that you're going to see typically, and these are really important because these are already predetermined. Your cam locks need to be placed in these specific locations in order for them to actually function properly. So each of these does explain what type of a cabinet you're going to use it on. So this is a one-door base cabinet. And when you have a one-door base cabinet with a lock, this is the location it needs to be actually drawn at for it to work. You have a drawer that has a lock on it. It's a typical horizontal lock for a drawer. We're going to center it on the drawer, and we're going to mount it 1.5 inches down from the top of that drawer front. This is for a two-door cabinet. So a two-door cabinet is a little unique because we typically will mount the lock to the right-hand door. So we're going to mount one lock to the right-hand door. This is the location of that lock. And there's a separate hardware called the DL300 and the DL200 that you will also need for this type of lock. We're going to talk about that here in just a minute, though. And then that just leaves the gang lock, which, again, we're going to save that one for last because that's more complicated. That's when you have multiple drawers. It says 2+ drawers on a cabinet that need to all lock with one lock. So you may have seen these before, but it's just one lock or one cam lock at the top, and it locks every drawer inside of that cabinet. So, oh, I almost forgot. We also have upper cabinet locks too. So this is for a two-door upper cabinet. This is the mounting location of that lock, as well as the lock number that you're going to have to use for that. All right. And this actually, take note of this too, this will vary in height. It says plus apron height, meaning if you have a valance behind here, you need to also add that valance to this dimension. So if I had a 2-inch valance behind this, I would need a 3 3/4 inch tall, or the lock would need to be 3 3/4 off the bottom of that cabinet door. All right, that leads us into some of the section views that we're going to see. So these are section details going through those locks. This is the CV85 here, which looks like vertical base. So this is also what's used here on our drawer front. So we're looking at a vertical cut through of a cabinet. You have your cam lock here. And then you also have this hardware, which is called the SP100. What that is, it's called a strike plate. And that's what the arm of the lock actually catches on when it turns, and it turns to lock or locking position. It will catch that strike plate and keep that drawer from pulling out. Vice versa, when the drawer is unlocked, this arm comes down, and then this is no longer obstructing the drawer from being moved out. So moving on, we have the vertical through an upper, let's see, this is through an upper cabinet. So again, that would be the same as this guy here. So we're looking at that cabinet. The lock is near the bottom of the cabinet door. It has a strike plate, the SP100 there as well. And the lock is mounted 1 3/4 from the bottom of the door. Plus, if you have an apron or a valance, you need to increase the height of that, whatever that valance is in height. This is looking horizontally through a base cabinet. So this is a one-door base cabinet looking down through that cabinet, and you're seeing that the strike plate is mounted to the side wall of the cabinet versus the top or the bottom of the cabinet. This strike plate is mounted there, and oh, sorry. Yeah, the strike plate is mounted there, and it prevents the door from opening. So the hinges would be on this side, strike plate and lock would be on the non-hinge side of that door. So once the lock is engaged, it hits that strike plate, keeps the door from opening. So we've talked about almost all of these except for gang locks and the two-door base cabinet. So the two-door base cabinet also needs, if you're only locking one door, you're putting a lock on one door, you need a special hardware that's called the DL200 or the DL300. What that is, and I actually do have one here, what that is a mechanism that is built, will attach it to the bottom of the cabinet, on the inside of that cabinet. And what it is a mechanism here like this. It focuses a little bit. Come on. All right, there we go. So it looks like this. Okay, it's going to spin it around real quick so you can see it. Okay, so that's that. This will actually, these screw holes that are here, these are going to get mounted to the inside bottom of your cabinet. And then you have these two metal prongs that stick out from the left and right of this mechanism. And what happens is you lock one door. Once that door is shut, this actually will kick out, and your other door has another plastic piece mounted to it, which will actually keep that door from opening as long as this is locked, like this side's locked. So these are kind of complicated, but this is called the DL300. I will also provide a little chart from the Timberline book that actually explains how to use these. So it talks about how from the right-hand side, you do need, let me see, I'll pull it up here so you can see it, but I'll try to save it in the folder here for you as well. Wait, I just saw it. There it is right there. Okay. Okay, so this is their page that deals with that. Kind of hard to see again because my screen's a little bit small here. But they're showing it used at the top of a cabinet. So that's what we're seeing up here. We typically will use it at the bottom of a cabinet, so like right here. And then there's this chart that sits right below that diagram. Whoops. Okay, if I can get it to zoom, there we go. So these are the notes that you need to pay attention to. So if you have a lock on the right door and you're mounting one of those to the bottom of your cabinet, it says use the DL300 or the DL300W for the white mechanism. All right. If you did want to mount it to the top, you would want to use the DL200 as long as your lock is on the right door. If your lock is on the left door, which is not normal for us, we always put the lock on the right unless the architect specifies otherwise. But if you put the lock on the left door, then the hardware is flip-flopped. The DL300 would get mounted to the top of the cabinet, or if you're using the bottom mount kit, you would want the DL200 at the bottom of the cabinet. Real important notes to pay attention to. Right-hand locks will get the DL300 at the bottom. Left-hand door locks on a two-door cabinet will get a DL200 at the bottom of the cabinet. So again, I'll try to save this in the folder for you. These are really important notes to hang on to. Just to remember to use that in your drawing when you do have a two-door cabinet with a lock like that. Then that leads us to the gang locks. The gang locks are a little more complicated. There is a actual really nice example of one up in Loves Park. It's really old. It's been there since before I started working here, and it's really dusty. Even had a spider living inside of it at one point. Anyways, this is the gang lock system. So we made this model here to represent like what's happening, so you could kind of see more of the visual breakdown of all the different hardwares that go into one of these. These slides are for your drawers, of course, but then on the side of your cabinet, you have a route, which is produced in the shop. They make that to put this, they put this thing called the lock bar. The lock bar fits inside of the sidebar of that cabinet, and it's almost like a little slide on its own. Attached to that slide, you have hardware 41. Hardware 41 is what's called an adjustable pin. You only need one per drawer, but what it is it's a little pin that gets mounted to that slide, and it will move up or down, which will put this bumper here, which is hardware 42, the drawer locking clip. This adjustable pin will run into the locking clip. Locking clip is attached to the side of a drawer. So if the lock is engaged, this pin will be preventing this from moving out. And since this is attached to the side of your drawer, that will prevent your drawer from moving out. Again, these pins move up or down simultaneously as the slide moves up or down. So how that slide moves up or down, though, is where we're going to go next. So just like you normally would, you'd have your cam lock mounted to the front of your cabinet door. So that's, again, if I go back to that CAD file, I can show you this is the location of where that lock would need to be mounted to that cabinet drawer front. Okay. And from there, once you have that mounted to the cabinet drawer front, you're going to come back over here, and the cam lock that's used for these has a pin on the back of it that sticks out. The pin on the back of that will run into these two little bars. That is called the lock bar clip. Lock bar clip is also mounted to that slide, the lock bar, in the side of the cabinet. So as this cam lock turns, it raises and lowers the lock bar clip, which raises and lowers the lock bar, which is like a slide inside of that cabinet. So real complicated mechanism. You don't have to fully understand how it works to be able to draw it, but these are all the different hardwares that you would need to make this actually work. So they're all labeled here. Again, this is in that quality folder. So if you ever wanted to look at that, you can. It's also in your tool palettes under cabinet components, I believe, and you can find it there. A couple of little side notes to note about these two is that when you're using a a gang lock, your drawer and drawer fronts, well, they're hidden for clarity here, but drawers must be at least 2 3/4 inches tall minimum in order for this to work. Usually our drawers are no less than 4 inches anyway, so that's really not a big deal. Just keep that in mind if you are drawing one of these, that your drawers have to be at least 2 3/4 tall. And then the other note that you want to pay attention to as well is that for this to work, you also need 1 1/4 inch minimum from the top of your cabinet or top of your drawer to the bottom of the top rail. Now, the top rail is this piece here that spans the top of the cabinet. So between the drawer, the top of this drawer, and the underside of this, you need 1 1/4 inch of space. That's for all the movement of all these parts to go up and down. Now, there are also such things as side-mounted gang locks, which only vary slightly from what we just looked at. If you have a side-mounted gang lock, the lock clip or lock bar clip is actually a different style, so that hardware does change. The actual lock mechanism is also a different lock style too. Otherwise, all of the hardware is exactly the same and functions exactly the same. It's just the difference is up here, you may have a little bit of variation in hardware because it's mounting to the side versus the front of the cabinet. So that's a gang lock. Again, if you're in Lowe's Park, you have a really good example of one over by the engineering department. You can utilize that as a reference if you are in Austell. Unfortunately, we don't have one here, but we do have these details which are really helpful in understanding how these work. All right. So I think one last hardware that I have not gone over with you guys is that we have, well, actually two, if you count this one. So inside of a cabinet, or between the cabinet drawer and the cabinet, or the cabinet door and the cabinet carcass, we have what are called rubber bumpers. So these are just little stickers, pretty much, that are a rubberized material that prevent the door from slamming on the cabinet carcass or the sidewall of the cabinet when you close the door or the drawer. These are placed on the back of the cabinet door or drawer in the shop. So if you have cabinets in your office, you can actually open them up and you will see these on there. But again, they're just a really simple sticker. We don't really even draw them in the prints because they're so small, but the shop knows to put them on. So that's also worth noting, at least, to understand how those are, or what those are and what they do. Um, and then the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is toe kicks. So let's go to an 80A style cabinet. So toe kick hardware, we do utilize something called the Easy Kick. It is a metal bracket that is pre-made. We buy them from this company, and it screws into the back of your door. It also screws into the back of your base trim. So if you have a cabinet like this, what you're going to see is you'll have, make sure this is correct here, sorry. When you're using a Easy Kick, you're going to have the base trim attached to your door of your cabinet. This is used primarily in ADA applications. So if you have a cabinet door or a cabinet that a wheelchair will need access to get under, for example, a sink cabinet, you will want these for ADA clearance so you can get a wheelchair underneath that cabinet. In order for somebody with limited ability to be able to roll the wheelchair there, still wash their hands, use the sink, whatnot. These are really simple brackets. I'll pull up their website here. But what's worth noting is that as this door opens, the base trim actually opens with the door, meaning that this cabinet is actually open to the floor below as well. And when you do have one of those brackets, and it is important to note that we are going to use a 1/2 inch gap between the base trim and the floor itself. The 1/2 inch gap there is to prevent the base trim from scraping the floor. If the floor is out of whack or unlevel, a 1/2 inch is more than enough for that base trim to clear it. Hopefully it wouldn't have any issue clearing it at a 1/2 inch, but that's what we roll with as far as standards go. So the base trim is raised up a 1/2 inch from the floor because it does move and open with the door on these cabinets. Let me pull up the Easy Kick website so I can show you what that hardware looks like. One sec here. Okay. So you kind of get a glimpse as to what that looks like here. So there's your cabinet door, there's your base trim. This metal bracket is screwed in there, and it attaches that base trim to that door so it can all open as one hardware, all in one motion. These are available in black and white. They are ADA compliant and they are in our standard hardware list as well. So again, those are up here. I think they're hardware 22. They're hardware 22B and 22W for black and white. So those are custom ADA style brackets. Oh no, I'm sorry, they're hardware 21. 22 is a sort of is a 3D printed version of that bracket that we're actually using in our shop occasionally when we have a toe kick or a base trim that's a little bit shorter than what this comes in. Previous to that, we would actually cut these down if we needed to make them work. But if the base trim is only like 2 inches tall, then we will actually 3D print a bracket that fits between the door and the base trim there. So that is another hardware that is something that we do use, but not very often. So let's go through that list one more time. We'll go through what we've got in the standard hardware list because it does look a little overwhelming at first, understanding what this is. So we have cabinet hinges at the very front. So that's hardwares 1 through hardware 5. Now, there is quite a few in there. So you got hardware 1, which is the standard hinge plate. The hinge I have at my desk here does not have a hinge plate with it, but the hinge plate is what attaches this hinge to the side of the cabinet. If you open up one of those little cabinet examples in Loves Park, you'll see that. If you're in Austell, you can open up one of our break room cabinets or any of the cabinets in the office with a door, and you'll see that hinge plate. Again, this one does not have one, but anytime you use a Blum hinge, you're going to have hardware 1-0, which is the hinge plate that mounts to the cabinet door or cabinet side wall. And then the hinge itself is going to be hardware 3, 4, or 5, depending on if it's free swing, self close, or soft close. All right, so hardware 3 is the free swing, hardware 4 is the self close, and hardware 5 is the soft close hardware for these hinges. I did skip over hardware 2. If you're looking at hardware 2 is the restrictor clip that we mentioned earlier. In the last video, we talked about when you have a cabinet door that is up against a wall, we will sometimes put a restrictor clip on that door in order to prevent that door from swinging open and hitting the drywall over here. How you note that on a drawing, and we'll talk about this again when we get into actually cabinet drawing here, but to note that on a drawing, what we'll do is we'll put an asterisk on the cabinet door, usually make it a little larger here, so we'll put it something like that. And then in the side notes of our drawing, we'll put a little note, engineering note that says any cabinet doors marked with an asterisk to receive hardware 2. So hardware 2, again, all that is a hardware that clips onto your hinge, and it prevents that hinge from opening more than 90 degrees, so it will not hit the wall. We also use those fillers for that same purpose too, but we'll usually use both to make sure that there is no issue of that. All right, moving down the list, we've talked about the hinges. Let me go into slides next. So hardware 6 is the self-close slide. Again, only available in increments of 2. So as you look at this list, you can see they're available in 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, and 28 sizes. Those are the different lengths you can buy them in. Moving down the list from there, you have your soft close slides. Again, 2-inch increments for these as well, 10 through 28. And then you have push to open slides, which we didn't really mention before, but they work similar to what we do when we have a push to open drawer, meaning that you push on that door and it pops out. Same thing goes for these. You push on that drawer, it'll pop out, and then you can pull it out the rest of the way. And those are also available in increments of 2, sizes 10 through 28. Underneath of that is hardware 9 and 10. Hardware 9 and 10, those are those Aventos HK hinges, which are the massive, almost little hinges that we use for the vanity screens typically. So that's these guys. Moving down the list, you have hardware 11, which is the shelf pin. Whoops, the shelf pin that goes inside of a cabinet for an adjustable shelf. That's this little guy here. We've already looked at those. Hardware 12 is a magnetic catch. I don't know that I have any in my box of fun here. If I don't have any, I'll have to get some, but up in Illinois, they do have those in that drawer in the engineering department. That's what we looked at when we were looking at these guys. That's this here. Okay, and those come in singles or doubles, so and different colors too. Hardware 17 is for a file drawer. File drawers are going to be over in the, you see them here. Okay, so hardware, what do we say, 12, 17. Hardware 17 are these little clips. These get attached to the top of your drawer box, and then they have a metal, really thin metal strip that runs from left to right of that drawer, or front to back, depending on how they're mounted. And it allows you to hang folders off of those bars. So here it says hardware 17, file bar and clip typical. And then there's some little side notes that are also worth noting here as well. If you are intending for a drawer to be using file folders, you do have to make sure that it has an inside dimension of 10 inches tall, meaning that from here to the bottom of that drawer on the inside, this has to be 10 inches minimum for that to work. All right. So let's see. Yep, that's it for that. So those are those file bars and clips. Only use them when you're using a cabinet drawer that is going to be using file folders in it. And when you do, make sure that your cabinet is at least 10 inches tall from the bottom of the cabinet or bottom of the drawer to the top of the drawer box. Let's move back over here. All right. These are standard poles that we use for what is called an access panel. We will be talking about those later when we get into furniture pieces. Hardware 20, we didn't look at that yet today. That's not dealing with cabinets. That is what's called a Z-clip. We will talk about that when we go into panel drafting next. 21 and 21, or 21B and W is the ADA Easy Kick. That's this guy here, used when you have to have wheelchair access to the inside of a cabinet. We'll use that as a bought product. 22B and 22W are very similar. We 3D print those though, and they are the same type of mechanism. 23, we haven't looked at yet. 24, we should look at that. It's a good reminder. So we haven't really looked at trash cabinets yet. Trash cabinets are actually really important too. They get used quite a bit. We do have a standard drawing of one here. You will see these in Loves Park as well. There is a standard trash drawer display that's over by the printers in the engineering wing. How these work is they are practically a drawer box that is flipped upside down. So you can see there are still drawer slides attached to these, and we usually use 2 drawer slides to mount these. But it is an upside down drawer essentially. You can see in this axial view, this is that upside down drawer. The top of that drawer is a demountable, removable piece. So that gets routed out to match the trash can that we're going to use. So the trash can actually hangs off of this panel here, as you can see here and here. And these routes are very important. They have to be exact for these trash cans to work right. And we do make these tops removable in case they ever want to switch trash cans or if they ever need to for any reason. And that's where the button fix type 2 comes in. The button fix type 2 is a very small plastic mechanism that we use to attach those. That's kind of what they look like. They're kind of a gray and a green color. It'll focus a little better. I'll spin that around too. So the green part is detachable from the gray part. That usually will get mounted to the inside of that drawer, and the gray part will get mounted to the top of that drawer, making that removable. So they are kind of tight, so they do need a little bit of force to pull them apart. But there they go. That's the 2 separate parts. They clip together. You pop them together, and I can't even do it. There we go. Probably could even hear the snap of that. So they snap together. They're pretty snug. They are removable though in case you ever do need to take them off. So in this video, or in this little axial view here, you can kind of see how that top is sticking off the side. So it gives you a little bit of leverage to be able to pop that off. All right. Anyways, so that is the button fix type 2, which is hardware 24.1 and 24.2, the green part and the gray part. All right. So moving on down the list, we have the A&M brackets, which we are not going to talk about those yet. We'll get into that when we do more floating counters and floating shelves and different things like that. Usually you run into these when you do your furniture pieces more, but we'll talk about that here soon. Let's see, any other hardwares that we need to talk about for cabinets? Coat rods, we'll talk about that shortly. These are the different locks. These can be a little intimidating at first to look at, but we have looked at all of these. They have the 095 and the 085, which going back to this page here, these are labeled out for you, explaining what type of hardware you need for each of these. So 85, 95, and so on. So you can find those there. The front number on these spec numbers is the actual finish of that, which we talked about earlier in the Timberline or Compex Timberline book. You can find those finishes there. That's what's labeled on the right hand side over here. Then you have your DL300 and your DL200, which again is the that little mechanism that this guy here, the one that makes it so you can have a two-door cabinet that locks with one lock. Just to recap that. Then you have your SP101, which is the strike plate, just that little metal angle that the locks hook onto to keep the door from opening. All these other hardwares that are below are pertaining to the gang locks. So all of these here are all gang lock related hardware, which if you're ever questioning what hardware you need for that, I would definitely use the axonometric view detail we have here to be able to understand which of these hardwares you need to spec for those types of locks. All right, so we'll keep on moving. We talked briefly about undermount slides. They are not used very often, but they come in self-close and soft close. If you do pay attention to this, these self-close slides are self-sustaining. The soft close slides, if you look at those, they do have a note here saying they need hardware 45 as well. Hardware 45 is an extra bracket that you have to order separately. So if you use a soft close undermount slide, please make sure to also label hardware 45 with that. There's notes here that kind of help remind you for that, but if you forget, I'll try to look for that on the drawings too. Talk about the Velcro hardware 46 later when we get to banquettes and benches, so you don't got to worry about that now. The K and V brackets, we will talk about that when we get to adjustable shelves. That's the majority of what's left here. I'm going to scroll through that. Then at the very bottom, we have 3 standard trash cans that we try to use from, for the most part. That would be the Rubbermaid 2956, which is the smallest guy that we have. That's 7 gallons. We have the Rubbermaid 2957, which is a 10-gallon trash can. And then we have the Tough Guy, which is a 19-gallon trash can. Those are our 3 standard trash cans that we use for cabinets. So those are all there for you. Interiors of cabinets. So we haven't really mentioned this yet. This is more about cabinet drafting, so we'll talk about it later as well. But interiors of cabinets, you're going to have mellow black or mellow white. This is black melamine or white melamine. This is pretty typical. Most cabinets on the inside will be one or the other. And if it's not noted on the architecturals, how you're going to note what one to use is basing it based on what the finish of the outside of the cabinet is. So if the outside of the cabinet is generally a darker material, you will want to use mellow black, or melamine, black melamine. If it is a lighter colored material, you will want to use white melamine to match. Let's see, is there anything else we want to look at here? Cabinet hardware wise? No, not really. So that pretty much covers the hardware that is used for cabinets. In the next video, we'll be talking about cabinet blocks. So I can show you a little rundown of what those look like and what's included with that. And then following that video, we'll actually get into cabinet drafting. So we'll kind of get to start actually drawing something. So I'm going to leave this one off here, and then we'll come back in the next video to talk about the cabinet blocks.